My daughter stood in front of her friends at her 18th birthday party and called me the most embarrassing mother alive. She looked me dead in the eye, surrounded by her spoiled classmates, and said the words that shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. God, Mom, you're so embarrassing. Can you just leave already? You're ruining everything. The laughter that followed from her friends felt like daggers. I stood there in the doorway of our own home, holding the birthday cake I'd spent hours decorating, watching my only child dismiss me like I was nothing. That night, something inside me broke. But what she didn't know was that her cruel words would cost her everything she'd ever dreamed of. Because the next morning I walked into the bank and did something that would change both our lives forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Francine Bishop, but everyone calls me Fran. I'm 52 years old, and for the past 18 years, my entire world has revolved around one person, my daughter Emma. Her father walked out when she was 3, leaving me to raise her alone while working 2 jobs to make ends meet. I cleaned offices at night and worked at a local insurance firm during the day. Also, Emma could have the life I never had. I saved every penny I could, skipping meals, wearing the same clothes for years, driving a car that was older than some of my coworkers. Every sacrifice was worth it, because I had a dream. I wanted Emma to go to college, to have opportunities, to never struggle the way I did. For 15 years, I put money aside in a college fund that grew slowly but steadily. $20 here, $50 there, sometimes just $5 when money was tight. I worked overtime shifts, took on extra cleaning contracts, sold things I didn't need. When other mothers bought themselves new dresses or went out for dinner with friends, I stayed home and watched the numbers in that savings account climb higher. The fund had grown to over $60,000 by Emma's senior year of high school. It wasn't Harvard money, but it was enough for a good state school, enough to give her the education I never had the chance to get. Emma knew about the college fund, of course. I'd mentioned it countless times when she complained about our modest lifestyle. We're saving for your future. I'd tell her when she asked why we couldn't afford the expensive clothes her friends wore, or why we never went on fancy vacations. She'd roll her eyes and mutter something about how all her friends' parents could afford both college and nice things. I'd bite my tongue and remind myself that she was young, that she didn't understand sacrifice yet. I thought she'd appreciate it someday. The trouble started during Emma's senior year when she fell in with a group of kids from the wealthy side of town. These weren't the friends she'd grown up with, the ones who understood that not everyone had unlimited spending money. These were the children of lawyers and doctors and business owners, kids who drove BMWs to school and spent more on a single outfit than I made in a week. Suddenly, Emma was ashamed of our small house, our old furniture, my secondhand clothes. She started making excuses for why her friends couldn't come over, why she had to meet them at the mall instead of having them pick her up at home. I watched my daughter transform from a sweet, grateful girl into someone I barely recognized. She became demanding, entitled, constantly comparing our life to the lives of her new friends. When I picked her up from school in my 15-year-old Honda, she'd duck down in the passenger seat like she was hiding. When I suggested we have a nice dinner at home for her birthday, she threw a fit because she wanted to have a party like Madison Wheeler, whose parents rented out an entire restaurant for her celebration. "All my friends will think I'm poor," Emma whined, and the words stung more than she could know. We weren't poor, not really. We had a roof over our heads, food on the table, and that precious college fund growing in the bank. But we weren't rich either, and Emma had started to see that as a personal failing on my part. Against my better judgment, I agreed to let Emma have the party at our house. I spent weeks planning it, stretching our budget to buy decorations and food that would impress her new friends. I took time off work to clean the house until it sparkled, rearranged furniture to create more space, and even bought a new tablecloth to cover the scratches on our old dining room table. I wanted Emma to be happy, to see that even though we didn't have mansion money, we could still create something special. The morning of the party, I woke up early to start preparing. I made Emma's favorite breakfast and brought it to her room on a tray, something I'd done every year on her birthday since she was small. But instead of the smile I expected, she barely looked up from her phone. "Thanks," she mumbled, not even meeting my eyes. I felt a chill of disappointment but pushed it aside. Maybe she was just nervous about the party. I spent the entire day cooking and decorating. I made 3 different appetizers from scratch, baked an elaborate birthday cake that took me 4 hours to decorate with intricate frosting roses, and hung streamers and balloons in Emma's school colors. I even bought her a new dress with money I'd been saving for a car repair, because I wanted her to feel beautiful on her special day. When I presented it to her that afternoon, she held it up with a look of barely concealed disappointment. "It's nice, Mom," she said in that tone teenagers use when they're trying to be polite but failing miserably. "It's just, Madison's dress cost $300, and this looks kind of cheap." The word hit me like a slap. I'd spent 2 hours at the department store trying to find something she'd love within our budget, and she called it cheap. "It was the best I could do, sweetheart," I said quietly, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. "I thought you'd like the color." She sighed dramatically. "I know you tried, Mom. It's fine, I'll make it work." Make it work, like my gift was something she had to endure rather than appreciate. As the afternoon wore on and party time approached, Emma's anxiety about impressing her friends became more obvious. She kept checking the decorations I'd put up, moving things around and sighing like nothing was quite right. When I suggested we put some music on to test the sound system, she shook her head and said her friend Tyler would handle that because he had better equipment. When I offered to help her get ready, she declined and said Madison was coming early to do her makeup because she knew about all the good products. I tried not to let it hurt. I told myself that Emma was just excited about her party and wanted everything to be perfect. But deep down, I could feel her pulling away from me, ashamed of the life we'd built together. The life I'd worked so hard to provide for her. The guests started arriving at 7, and I was shocked by what I saw. These kids were dressed like they were going to a red carpet event, not a high school birthday party. The girls wore designer dresses and carried purses that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. The boys had expensive haircuts and watches that gleamed under our living room lights. I suddenly felt very conscious of my own appearance in my nicest blouse and pants. Clothes that had seemed perfectly appropriate that morning but now felt shabby and outdated. I tried to be a good hostess, greeting each guest with a warm smile and offering them food and drinks. Most of them were polite enough, though I could see them taking in our modest home with barely concealed judgment. They complimented the decorations in that overly sweet way that meant they were being condescending, and I saw more than one of them exchange glances when they thought I wasn't looking. For the first hour, I stayed in the background, letting Emma enjoy her party while I kept the food trays full and the music at the right volume. I was proud of how everything had turned out.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
House looked festive and welcoming, the food was delicious, and Emma seemed to be having a good time with her friends. I started to think that maybe I'd been worried about nothing, that the party would be a success, and Emma would remember this birthday fondly. That's when Madison Wheeler's mother showed up. I'd met Patricia Wheeler a few times at school events, and she always made me feel like I was somehow lacking. She had that polished look that money could buy, perfect hair, expensive clothes, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She swept into our living room like she owned the place, air-kissing Emma, and surveying the party with the critical eye of someone used to much finer things. "What a sweet little gathering," she said to me, and the way she emphasized little made it clear she was being patronizing. "You've done such a nice job with what you have to work with." The backhanded compliment stung, but I smiled and thanked her for coming. Patricia didn't stay long, but her presence seemed to shift something in the room. Suddenly, Emma was more self-conscious, more aware of the differences between our celebration and the parties her wealthy friends were used to. I watched her face change as Patricia made subtle comments about the cozy space and the homemade decorations. By the time Patricia left, Emma looked mortified. That's when Tyler Morrison, the son of a prominent local attorney, decided to be, quote, helpful. He started talking loudly about how his parents had hired a DJ and rented a country club for his party, how they'd had a professional photographer and a dessert table that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Other kids chimed in with stories of their own elaborate celebrations, each one more extravagant than the last. I could see Emma shrinking with each story, her face growing redder, as her friends painted pictures of parties that made our celebration look pathetic by comparison. I wanted to rescue her somehow, to remind her that we'd put love and effort into this party even if we couldn't match the lavish spending of her friends' families. But before I could say anything, she spoke up herself. "Well," Emma said, her voice shaky but determined, "at least my mom tried. She worked really hard on this." I felt a surge of gratitude and love for my daughter in that moment. She was defending me, defending us, despite her embarrassment. But then Tyler laughed, not meanly but with the casual cruelty that comes so easily to entitled teenagers. "It's actually kind of sweet," he said, "like, nostalgic. My grandmother used to make homemade cakes like that." The comparison to a grandmother's baking was clearly meant as an insult, suggesting that my efforts were old-fashioned and unsophisticated. That's when I made my mistake. I should have stayed in the kitchen, should have let Emma handle her friends on her own. But I couldn't stand to see her humiliated, couldn't bear to watch these spoiled kids mock the effort I'd put into making her day special. So I walked into the living room with the birthday cake I'd spent hours perfecting, thinking that maybe seeing the beautiful roses I'd piped and the loving message I'd written would remind everyone that this party was about celebrating Emma, not showing off wealth. "Time for cake," I announced cheerfully, setting the 3-layer creation down on the coffee table. I'd been so proud of that cake. The frosting was perfectly smooth, the decorative roses looked almost real, and I'd written, "Happy 18th birthday, Emma," in elegant script across the top. But as I looked around the room at the faces of Emma's friends, I realized I'd made a terrible error in judgment. The silence that followed was deafening. These kids were used to professional bakery cakes, probably ordered from expensive specialty shops. My homemade creation, which had seemed so beautiful in our kitchen, suddenly looked amateur and embarrassing under their scrutiny. I saw Tyler smirk and whisper something to the girl next to him. I saw Madison's eyes widen in what looked like second-hand embarrassment. And then I saw Emma's face. The look of horror and shame was unmistakable. In that moment, I realized that instead of saving the situation, I'd made it infinitely worse. My daughter was looking at me like I'd committed the ultimate social sin, like I'd exposed some terrible secret she'd been trying to hide. "Mom," Emma said quietly, but her voice carried across the suddenly silent room. "What are you doing?" I blinked, confused by the question. "I brought out your cake, sweetheart. It's time to sing happy birthday." The laugh that came from Tyler was sharp and cruel. "Did your mom actually make that herself?" he asked Emma, like homemade cake was the most ridiculous concept he'd ever heard. Emma's face turned crimson. I could see her struggling, torn between defending me and saving face with her friends. In that moment of hesitation, I saw everything our relationship had become. She was ashamed of me, ashamed of our life, ashamed of the sacrifices I'd made to give her this party. "Yeah," Emma said finally, her voice small. "She made it." "That's actually really sweet," Madison chimed in, but her tone was the same condescending sweetness her mother had used earlier. Like something from a movie about poor people. The comment was meant to sound kind, but the underlying message was clear. We were the poor people, the ones to be pitied and talked about in hushed, sympathetic tones. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, a mixture of embarrassment and anger. These kids had been in my home for 2 hours, eating my food and enjoying my hospitality, and now they were treating me like some kind of charity case. But it was Emma's reaction that really broke my heart. Instead of telling her friends to stop, instead of standing up for the mother who'd worked herself to the bone to give her this party, she just stood there looking mortified. "Maybe we should just order pizza," Emma mumbled, not meeting my eyes. "I mean, if people are still hungry." The suggestion hit me like a physical blow. She was rejecting the cake I'd made with love, dismissing hours of work because her friends thought homemade desserts were beneath them. I felt tears stinging my eyes and fought to keep them from falling. I would not cry in front of these horrible, spoiled children. "Of course," I managed to say, my voice steady despite the pain crushing my chest. Whatever you want, sweetheart. I turned to leave the room, to give myself a moment to compose myself, but Tyler's voice stopped me in my tracks. Mrs. Bishop, he called out, and I turned back hopefully, thinking maybe he was going to say something kind to smooth over the awkwardness. Instead, he smiled that careless, cruel smile that only comes from a lifetime of privilege. Thanks for the party. It's really authentic. The way he said the word made it clear he didn't mean it as a compliment. That's when Emma said the words that changed everything between us forever. God, Mom, you're so embarrassing. Can you just leave already? You're ruining everything. The laughter that followed from her friends was like a knife twisting in my chest. But it was the look on Emma's face that destroyed me completely. She wasn't just embarrassed. She was angry with me for existing, for being her mother, for not being wealthy enough to give her the kind of party that would impress her new friends. I stood there in the doorway of my own living room, still holding the serving knife for the cake nobody wanted, and felt something inside me shatter. This was my daughter, the child I'd devoted my entire adult life to raising and supporting. The girl I'd sacrificed everything for, worked myself to exhaustion for, loved more than my own life. And she was looking at me like I was her greatest disappointment. Please, Mom, Emma continued, her voice pleading now. Just go to your room or something. We'll clean up later. Go to my room. In my own house. Like I was a child being sent away for misbehaving. The humiliation was complete and total. Emma's friends were all staring at me now, some looking uncomfortable but none saying anything to defend me. They were witnessing a daughter dismiss her mother like she was nothing, and they were just watching it happen. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell Emma exactly what I thought of her spoiled friends and their entitled attitudes. I wanted to remind her of every sacrifice I'd made, every extra shift I'd worked, every time I'd gone without so she could have something she wanted. I wanted to tell her that these kids whose approval she craved so desperately would forget her name the moment they graduated and moved on to their Ivy League colleges and trust fund lives. But I didn't say any of those things. Instead, I set the serving knife down on the nearest table and walked out of the room without another word. I could hear the party resuming behind me as I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, the sound of teenage laughter mixing with music that suddenly seemed too loud. I closed my door and sat on my bed, staring at the wall and trying to process what had just happened. My daughter had chosen her friends over me. She'd chosen fitting in with people who looked down on us, over standing by the mother who'd given her everything. In that moment, I realized that all my sacrifices had been for nothing. I'd raised a child who was ashamed of me, who saw my love and hard work as embarrassing obstacles to her social climbing. I sat there for hours, listening to the party continue downstairs. Part of me kept hoping Emma would come up to apologize, to tell me she was sorry for what she'd said and that she appreciated everything I'd done for her. But she never came. The party went on without me, and from what I could hear it went just fine. Better, probably, without the embarrassing mother around, to remind everyone that not everyone lived in mansions and drove luxury cars. When the last guest finally left around midnight, I heard Emma cleaning up downstairs. I waited for her to come to my room, to try to make things right between us. But instead, I heard her bedroom door close, and then the house was silent. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed replaying the evening over and over, seeing the shame in Emma's eyes every time I closed mine. By morning, I'd made a decision that would change both our lives forever. I got up early and made coffee, sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop and a stack of financial documents. The remnants of the party were still scattered around the living room, empty cups, crumpled napkins, and my beautiful homemade cake sitting untouched on the coffee table where I'd left it. Looking at that cake in the cold light of morning felt like looking at physical evidence of my failure as a mother. Emma came downstairs around 10, shuffling into the kitchen in her pajamas like nothing had happened. She poured herself a bowl of cereal and sat across from me without making eye contact. "Morning, Mom," she mumbled, scrolling through her phone while she ate. I watched her for a moment, this stranger, who looked like my daughter but treated me like an inconvenience. "How was the rest of your party?" I asked quietly. She shrugged. "Fine. Everyone had fun after." She trailed off, but we both knew what she meant. After I left, after the embarrassing mother was safely out of sight. "Good," I said. "I'm glad you had a nice time." She finally looked up at me, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes. But then she went back to her phone, dismissing me just like she had the night before. That's when I opened my laptop and pulled up my online banking. The college fund account showed a balance of $63,847.32. 18 years of sacrifice. 18 years of putting Emma's future ahead of my own needs and wants. 18 years of believing that love and hard work would be enough to raise a grateful, kind daughter. I thought about all the times I'd chosen to add money to this account instead of buying myself something nice. The vacation I'd never taken, the car I'd never replaced, the clothes I'd never bought. I thought about the extra shifts I'd worked when I was so tired I could barely stand. Also, this number could grow bigger. All so Emma could have opportunities I'd never had. I looked at my daughter, still absorbed in her phone, still oblivious to the pain she'd caused me, still taking for granted that her college would be paid for by the mother she found so embarrassing. And then I started typing. The transfer was surprisingly easy. A few clicks, a security code, and 18 years of savings moved from Emma's college fund to my personal checking account. $63,847.32 that would no longer be waiting for her when it came time to pay tuition. Money that I would use for something else entirely. Emma never looked up from her phone as I closed the laptop. She had no idea that her future had just changed forever, that the safety net I'd spent 18 years weaving had just disappeared. She was too busy texting her friends about the party, probably laughing about how awkward her embarrassing mother had been. I finished my coffee and went upstairs to start packing. Because if Emma was ashamed of the life we'd built together, if she thought I was such an embarrassment, then maybe it was time for me to build a different life altogether. A life where I didn't have to apologize for not being wealthy enough, sophisticated enough, or impressive enough for a daughter who'd forgotten how to appreciate the woman who'd raised her. As I folded clothes into a suitcase, I could hear Emma still moving around downstairs, completely unaware that everything was about to change. She thought she'd won last night, thought she'd successfully put me in my place. But she had no idea that her cruel words had set something in motion that would teach her the true cost of taking love for granted. The college fund was gone, but that was just the beginning. Because I'd spent 18 years putting Emma first, and now it was time to put myself first for once. Time to show my ungrateful daughter what life looked like when the embarrassing mother she was so ashamed of finally stopped embarrassing herself by staying where she wasn't wanted. I zipped up the suitcase and sat on my bed one last time, looking around the room where I'd spent so many nights planning Emma's future. Tomorrow, she'd have to start planning it herself. I drove away from that house with everything I owned packed into 2 suitcases and a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in 18 years. The morning sun was streaming through my windshield as I pulled out of our neighborhood for what I knew would be the last time. In my rearview mirror, I could see Emma's bedroom window, the curtains still drawn shut because she was probably sleeping off her birthday celebration, completely unaware that her mother had just walked out of her life. The freedom felt strange at first, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit. For so long, every decision I made had been filtered through one question: what's best for Emma? Where should we live so she could attend the best school district we could afford? What job should I take that would provide the most stable income for her future? How could I stretch our budget to give her the things she wanted while still saving for college? Now, for the first time in 18 years, I could make decisions based solely on what I wanted. And what I wanted was to disappear completely from Emma's life until she learned to appreciate what she'd lost. I'd made a reservation at a small bed and breakfast about 3 hours away, a charming place called Willowbrook Inn that I'd always wanted to visit but never could justify the expense. It was the kind of luxury I denied myself for years, choosing instead to put that money toward Emma's future. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was finally treating myself using the money I'd saved for her education. The innkeeper, a woman named Margaret with silver hair and kind eyes, welcomed me like I was an old friend returning home. She showed me to a beautiful room with a 4-poster bed, antique furniture, and windows that looked out over rolling hills dotted with wildflowers. It was peaceful, in a way our cramped house never had been, quiet except for the sound of birds singing and wind rustling through the trees. "How long will you be staying with us?" Margaret asked as she handed me the room key. "I'm not sure yet," I answered honestly. "I'm taking some time to figure things out." She smiled knowingly. "Those are often the best kinds of stays. Take all the time you need, dear." That first night, I sat on the small balcony outside my room with a glass of wine and my phone turned off, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was the first time in years that I'd had an entire evening to myself, with no responsibilities, no one to cook for or clean up after, no schedules to manage or futures to worry about. The silence was both peaceful and unsettling. I found myself thinking about Emma constantly during those first few days. Was she wondering where I'd gone? Had she tried to call or text? I'd left my phone turned off because I wasn't ready to face whatever anger or manipulation might be waiting for me. Part of me hoped she was worried, that my absence was making her realize how much I did for her daily life. But another part of me suspected she was probably relieved to have the house to herself, free from her embarrassing mother's presence. On the third day, I finally turned my phone back on. 27 missed calls from Emma, and a string of text messages that evolved from casual confusion to growing panic. "Mom, where are you?" was the first one, sent the morning after I left. "Seriously, where did you go? Your stuff is gone." That one came a few hours later. By the evening of the second day, the tone had shifted. "Mom, this isn't funny. I'm worried. Please call me back." The most recent message, sent just an hour before I turned my phone on, was different. "Mom, I went to pay for my graduation dress and the card was declined. What's going on? Call me now." I stared at that last message for a long time. The graduation dress. I'd promised to buy her a special dress for the ceremony, something beautiful that would make her feel confident and proud. It was supposed to be another gift from the mother who always found a way to give her daughter what she wanted, even when money was tight. But that mother was gone now, replaced by a woman who was finally learning to say no. Instead of calling her back immediately, I decided to take a walk through the inn's gardens. I needed to think carefully about how to handle this first real contact since I'd left. The gardens were spectacular, full of roses and lavender and herbs that filled the air with their fragrance. I found a bench beside a small fountain and sat down to compose my response. When I finally texted Emma back, I kept it simple. "I'm fine. I needed some space to think. We'll talk soon." My phone rang immediately. I let it go to voicemail, then listened to Emma's message. Her voice was shaky, confused, and for the first time since her birthday party, she sounded like the little girl I remembered instead of the entitled teenager she'd become. "Mom, I don't understand what's happening. Where are you? I've been calling everyone, and nobody knows where you went. I'm scared something happened to you. Please just call me back and tell me you're okay. And about the card thing, maybe there's just some mistake with the bank? Can you fix it? I really need that dress for graduation." Even in her worry, even in her fear that something might have happened to me, she was still focused on what she needed from me. The dress, the money, the problems she expected me to solve. It confirmed what I'd suspected. She wasn't missing me as a person, she was missing me as a provider. I didn't call her back that day. Or the next. By the end of the week, I'd established a routine at the inn that felt more peaceful than anything I'd experienced in years. I woke up when my body felt ready, not when an alarm clock demanded it. I had long, leisurely breakfasts in the inn's dining room, reading books I'd never had time for when I was working constantly to support our household. I took walks through the countryside, visited local shops and art galleries, and spent hours just sitting and thinking about who I wanted to be, now that I was no longer defined solely by my role as Emma's mother. Margaret, the innkeeper, became a friend during those quiet days. She was a widow who'd raised 3 children as a single mother after her husband died young, and she understood the particular exhaustion that comes from pouring everything into your children's lives while forgetting to nurture your own dreams. "I did the same thing," she told me one morning over coffee. "Gave everything to my kids, worked myself to the bone, made their happiness my only priority. And you know what happened when they grew up and moved away?" I shook my head, though I suspected I knew where this was going. I had no idea who I was anymore. I'd been mom for so long that I'd forgotten I was also Margaret. It took me years to figure out what I actually liked, what I wanted from life, what made me happy independent of whether my children were happy. How did you figure it out? I asked. She gestured around us at the beautiful inn with its warm, welcoming atmosphere. I started this place, something that was mine, something that brought me joy, something that had nothing to do with being anyone's mother. Best decision I ever made. Her words stayed with me as I continued to ignore Emma's increasingly frantic calls and messages. My daughter's texts had evolved from confusion to anger to desperation, and I could see her starting to panic as she realized I wasn't coming back to rescue her from whatever problems my absence was creating. Mom, I don't know what I did wrong, but I'm sorry. Please come home. I need you. That message came on day 10 of my absence. The electricity is getting shut off tomorrow if someone doesn't pay the bill. I don't know how to do this stuff. Please help me. Day 12. I had to miss work because I don't have gas money, and the car is making that weird noise again. I don't know what to do. Day 14. Each message revealed how completely dependent Emma had become on my management of our life together. How little she'd learned about taking care of herself, despite being 18 years old. I'd been so focused on providing for her future that I'd failed to teach her how to handle basic adult responsibilities. The bills, the car maintenance, the household management, even simple things like grocery shopping and cooking, had all been my domain while she focused on school and social activities. Reading her messages, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and guilt. Satisfaction because she was finally beginning to understand how much I did for her daily life, how much work it took to keep our household functioning. Guilt because I could hear the real fear in her words as she faced adult responsibilities for the first time, without her mother there to handle everything. But I also noticed what was missing from her messages. Not once had she apologized for calling me embarrassing. Not once had she acknowledged how cruel she'd been at her birthday party, how she'd humiliated me in front of her friends and then dismissed me from my own home. Her messages were all about what she needed from me, what problems she needed me to solve. Even her apology was vague and self-serving. Sorry for whatever she might have done wrong, not sorry for the specific hurtful things she'd actually said and done. After 2 weeks at the inn, I finally decided it was time to call her back. But I wasn't ready to go home, and I wasn't ready to resume the role of mother who fixes everything. I was ready to have a conversation as two adults, one of whom had some hard lessons to learn about respect and gratitude. Emma answered on the first ring. Mom! Oh my God, finally! Where are you? When are you coming home? I'm somewhere safe, I said calmly. And I'm not coming home yet. What do you mean you're not coming home? Mom, everything is falling apart here. The electricity got shut off, and I had to go stay at Madison's house. But her parents are asking questions about where you are, and I don't know what to tell them. The car broke down completely, and the landlord called about the rent. I don't know how to handle any of this stuff. Then you'd better learn, I said simply. There was a long silence. Then Emma's voice, smaller and more confused than I'd heard it in years. I don't understand what's happening. Why are you doing this to me? I'm not doing anything to you, Emma. I'm taking care of myself for the first time in 18 years. You made it very clear at your birthday party that you're embarrassed by me and that you'd prefer I stay out of your way. So that's what I'm doing. That's not what I meant, she protested, but her voice lacked conviction. Isn't it? You told me I was embarrassing and that I was ruining everything. You told me to go to my room in my own house because you didn't want your friends to see me. You rejected the cake I spent hours making because it wasn't good enough for your new social circle. You made me feel unwelcome in my own home. I could hear her crying now, soft sniffling sounds that might have broken my resolve a month ago. But I'd had 2 weeks to think about everything that had led to that moment, and I was no longer willing to let tears manipulate me into forgetting how I'd been treated. I was just embarrassed, she whispered. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did hurt me, Emma. Deeply. And the worst part is that you knew exactly what you were doing when you said those things. You chose your friends, approval over treating your mother with basic respect. I'm sorry, okay? I'm really sorry. I was stupid and mean, and I wish I could take it back. But Mom, I need you to come home. I can't do this by myself. You're 18 years old, Emma. Most people your age are getting ready to leave for college and live independently. It's time you learned to take care of yourself. But what about graduation? What about my dress? What about college? There it was. The questions I'd been waiting for her to ask. The real reason she needed me to come home wasn't because she missed me, or because she'd learned to appreciate everything I'd done for her. It was because she had problems that needed solving, and bills that needed paying. What about them? I asked quietly. I need the dress for graduation, and I need to send in my deposit for state university. And I need to figure out the financial aid paperwork. Mom, I can't do all this stuff alone. The dress is your responsibility now. As for college, well, that's become more complicated. What do you mean complicated? I took a deep breath, knowing that what I was about to say would change everything between us permanently. I moved your college fund, Emma. Silence. Complete, shocked silence. You what? I transferred the money out of your college account. All of it. You can't do that. Her voice was rising toward hysteria. That's my money. That's for my education. Actually, it was my money. Money I earned. Money I saved. Money I sacrificed for, because I thought I was raising a daughter who would appreciate those sacrifices. But I was wrong. Mom, you can't be serious. You can't just steal my college fund because you're mad about some stupid party. The word steal hit me like a slap. After 18 years of working multiple jobs to save that money, after countless nights of choosing between my own needs and adding to her college fund, she was accusing me of stealing from her. I didn't steal anything, Emma. I withdrew my own money from an account I created and funded entirely by myself. Money you apparently took for granted while you were busy being embarrassed by the mother who was working herself to death to provide it. But how am I supposed to go to college now? How am I supposed to pay for anything? The same way millions of other young people do it. Student loans, scholarships, jobs, financial aid. Or maybe you could ask one of your wealthy friends for help, the ones you were so desperate to impress that you humiliated your own mother. She was crying harder now, the reality of her situation finally sinking in. Mom, please. I know I messed up, but you can't ruin my whole future because of one night. I'm not ruining your future, Emma. I'm forcing you to take responsibility for it. For 18 years, I made your future my responsibility, and look how you repaid me. Maybe it's time you learned what it actually takes to build a life. This is insane. You're being crazy and vindictive, and I don't understand why you're punishing me like this. Her words stung because part of me wondered if she was right. Was I being vindictive? Was I punishing her too harshly for teenage cruelty? But then I remembered the look in her eyes when she called me embarrassing, the way she dismissed me like I was nothing, the complete lack of gratitude or respect she'd shown for everything I'd given up to raise her. I'm not punishing you, Emma. I'm teaching you. About consequences, about respect, about what it costs when you take the people who love you for granted. By destroying my life, your life isn't destroyed. It's just going to be harder than you expected. Welcome to the real world, where actions have consequences, and where the people you hurt don't always come back to fix your problems. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking with adrenaline and emotion. It was the hardest conversation I'd ever had, but also strangely liberating. For the first time, I'd stood up to Emma's manipulation and entitlement. For the first time, I'd prioritized my own dignity over her immediate wants. My phone rang again immediately, but I turned it off. I wasn't ready for round 2 of that conversation. Instead, I walked out to the inn's garden and sat by the fountain, letting the sound of water wash over me while I processed what I'd just done. Had I gone too far? Had I let my hurt feelings override my maternal instincts? Part of me wanted to call Emma back, to tell her it would all be okay, to transfer the money back and return to our old pattern of me sacrificing everything for her comfort and security. But a bigger part of me knew that would be a mistake. Emma needed to learn these lessons, needed to understand that respect and gratitude weren't optional in relationships, even with family members who loved you unconditionally. She needed to discover her own strength and capability instead of relying on her mother to solve every problem and provide every opportunity. That evening, Margaret found me still sitting in the garden as the sun set. She sat down beside me without saying anything at first, just offering the comfort of companionship. "Difficult phone call?" she asked eventually. I nodded, not trusting my voice yet. "With your daughter?" I told her I'd withdrawn her college fund. She didn't take it well. Margaret was quiet for a moment, considering this. "Did she ask why you'd done it?" "She accused me of being vindictive and crazy. She said I was ruining her life to punish her for one night." "But it wasn't really about one night, was it?" I shook my head. "It was about years of taking me for granted, years of growing entitlement and disrespect that culminated in her humiliating me at her own birthday party. The party I worked so hard to make special for her. And has she apologized? Really apologized? Not just sorry that there are consequences? She apologized for whatever she might have done wrong. But she hasn't acknowledged the specific cruelty of what she said and did. Even today, she was more focused on what she needed from me than on understanding why I was hurt." Margaret nodded slowly. "You know, dear, some of the most important lessons we teach our children are the ones that feel cruel in the moment but necessary in the long run. Learning that actions have consequences, that respect must be earned even from family members, that gratitude is a choice, not an obligation others owe you. These are hard lessons but vital ones. I keep wondering if I've gone too far, if I'm being too harsh. Would you have learned these lessons if someone had been gentler with you?" I thought about my own upbringing, my own struggles. As a young adult, when I'd had to learn responsibility the hard way after my parents' early death. The harsh lessons had been painful but had ultimately made me stronger and more self-reliant. "Probably not," I admitted. "Then trust your instincts. You know your daughter better than anyone. You know what she needs to learn and how much pressure it will take to teach her." That night, I made a decision that would define the next phase of this strange new chapter in my life. I wasn't going home anytime soon. Emma needed time to struggle, to figure things out on her own, to understand what her life looked like without her mother there, to smooth every rough edge. And I needed time to rediscover who I was beyond the role of Emma's mother. The next morning, I extended my stay at the inn indefinitely and started thinking about what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. For the first time in 18 years, the possibilities felt endless. 3 weeks into my stay at Willowbrook Inn, I made a decision that surprised even me. I wasn't just going to hide away indefinitely, feeling sorry for myself and waiting for Emma to magically transform into a grateful daughter. I was going to use this time to build something entirely new, something that belonged to me alone. The college fund money that had once represented Emma's future was going to become the foundation for my own. Margaret had mentioned that the inn next door, Rosewood Manor, had been struggling financially and was up for sale. It was a beautiful Victorian property with 12 guest rooms, sprawling gardens, and a reputation for elegant wedding receptions. The current owners, an elderly couple named Harold and Dorothy Chen, were ready to retire but couldn't find buyers who understood the hospitality business well enough to maintain the property's standards. I'd walked past Rosewood Manor dozens of times during my stay at Willowbrook, admiring its wraparound porches and the rose gardens that gave it its name. Something about the place called to me in a way I'd never experienced before. It wasn't just beautiful. It felt like possibility made tangible, like a chance to create something meaningful with my own hands and vision. When Margaret mentioned over breakfast that Harold and Dorothy were getting desperate to sell, I heard myself asking questions I never would have imagined asking a month ago. What was the asking price? How much work did it need? Was the business profitable? How difficult was it to run an inn? Are you thinking what I think you're thinking? Margaret asked with a knowing smile. I might be crazy, I admitted, but I can't stop thinking about it. I've never run a business before, never managed anything bigger than a household budget. But something about that place feels like it's calling to me. Some of the best innkeepers I know started with no experience, except a love for hospitality and a willingness to work hard, Margaret said. Besides, you've been managing Emma's life, your career, and a household for 18 years. Running an inn isn't that different, except the guests eventually leave. That afternoon, I called Harold Chen and asked if I could tour the property. He sounded surprised but pleased to hear from a potential buyer, especially one who was already familiar with the inn business through my stay at Willowbrook. We arranged to meet the next morning. Rosewood Manor up close was even more spectacular than I'd imagined. The Victorian architecture was pristine, with intricate gingerbread trim and tall windows that filled every room with natural light. The 12 guest rooms each had their own character, from the tower suite with its panoramic views to the garden rooms that opened directly onto the rose-covered terraces. The commercial kitchen was spacious and well-equipped, and the dining room could easily seat 50 guests for wedding receptions or special events. But it was the library that sealed it for me. A cozy room lined floor to ceiling with books. It had a massive stone fireplace and comfortable reading chairs positioned to catch the afternoon light. I could picture myself there in the evenings, reading and planning menus and dreaming up ways to make the inn special for future guests. The business has been profitable, Harold explained as we walked through the property. But Dorothy and I are in our 70s now, and we don't have the energy to give it the attention it deserves. The right person could make this place truly special. What are you looking for in a buyer? I asked, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Someone who understands that this isn't just about making money, Dorothy said, joining us from the kitchen, where she'd been preparing lunch for their few remaining guests. Someone who cares about creating experiences for people, who appreciates the history and beauty of this place. As they talked about their vision for the inn's future, I found myself sharing ideas I hadn't even realized I was thinking. What if the inn specialized in writing retreats, offering peaceful spaces for authors and artists to work? What if we partnered with local farms to create a farm-to-table dining experience? What if we offered cooking classes in that beautiful kitchen or garden tours that taught guests about sustainable landscaping? Harold and Dorothy exchanged glances, and I could see them growing excited about the possibilities I was describing. By the end of the tour, we were talking seriously about numbers and timelines and what it would take to make the transition. The asking price was exactly what I had in the bank from Emma's college fund. It felt like fate, like the universe was telling me this was what the money was meant for all along. Not Emma's education, but my own education in independence and self-reliance. Not her future, but mine. That evening, I called my lawyer to discuss the legal aspects of the purchase and my accountant to review the financial projections Harold had provided. Both were cautiously optimistic about the investment, though they warned me about the challenges of running a hospitality business as a single owner with no prior experience. "It's a big risk, Fran," my accountant said. "Are you sure you're ready for this kind of responsibility?" "I've been responsible for everything in my life for 18 years, I replied. "At least this responsibility will be something I chose for myself." While I was negotiating the purchase of Rosewood Manor, Emma's attempts to reach me had intensified dramatically. Her text messages arrived daily, sometimes hourly, and had evolved from angry demands to desperate pleas to elaborate guilt trips designed to manipulate me into coming home. "Mom, I had to drop out of graduation because I couldn't afford the cap and gown rental," read one message. "I'm the only senior who won't be walking across the stage because of what you're doing to me." Another, "Madison's mom asked me if you were having some kind of mental breakdown. I didn't know what to say. People are starting to ask questions about where you are." And then, "I had to move out of the house because I couldn't pay the rent. I'm staying with different friends each night because I don't have anywhere else to go. Is this what you wanted, to make me homeless?" Each message was designed to make me feel guilty, to convince me that I was the villain in this story, for refusing to enable her continued dependence and entitlement. But I'd had enough time and distance now to see the manipulation clearly. Emma wasn't apologizing for how she'd treated me. She was trying to punish me for refusing to continue being her personal problem solver. The message that finally made me realize how little Emma understood about the real world came on a Thursday morning. "I applied for financial aid for college, but they want all this information about your income and assets. You need to fill out the FAFSA forms and send them your tax returns. I need this done by Friday or I'll lose my spot at State University." I stared at that message for a long time, marveling at the audacity. Even after I'd withdrawn the college fund, even after I'd made it clear that she needed to take responsibility for her own future, Emma still expected me to handle the bureaucratic aspects of her college planning. She still saw me as her personal assistant, required to manage the details of her life while she focused on more interesting things. Instead of responding to the text, I called the financial aid office at State University myself. After explaining the situation to a sympathetic counselor, I learned that Emma could apply for aid as an independent student if she could demonstrate that she was financially self-sufficient. It would require more paperwork and documentation, but it was entirely possible for her to fund her education through a combination of grants, loans, and work-study programs. I also learned that Emma had never actually submitted her application for admission to State University. She'd been accepted months ago but had missed multiple deadlines for confirming her enrollment and submitting required paperwork. Her spot in the incoming freshman class had been given to someone else weeks ago. When I called Emma to share this information, she answered the phone with barely contained rage. "It's about time you called me back," she snapped. "Do you have any idea what you've put me through? I've been trying to handle everything myself and it's impossible. I need you to come home right now and fix this mess." "There's nothing for me to fix, Emma. I called State University, and you missed the deadline to confirm your enrollment. You don't have a spot there anymore." Silence. Then, in a smaller voice, "What do you mean I don't have a spot? I mean, you were supposed to confirm your acceptance and submit paperwork months ago. Since you didn't, they gave your place to someone else. But I was waiting for you to help me with the financial stuff. I didn't know I was supposed to do all that other paperwork too." "Emma, you're 18 years old. College applications and enrollment procedures are designed for 18-year-olds to handle themselves. Most students don't have their mothers managing every detail of the process. But I've never done anything like this before. You always handled all the paperwork and deadlines and stuff." And there it was, the root of the problem I'd been enabling for years. I'd been so focused on providing for Emma that I'd never taught her to provide for herself. I'd handled every administrative task, every deadline, every complicated process, because it was easier and faster than teaching her to do it herself. I'd created a young adult who was completely unprepared to navigate the basic responsibilities of independent life. "Well, now you'll learn," I said calmly. "There are community colleges that still have open enrollment for the fall semester. You can start there, prove yourself academically, and transfer to a 4-year school later. Plenty of successful people have taken that path." "Community college?" Her voice was horrified. "Mom, I can't go to community college. What will people think? What will Madison and Tyler and everyone say? They'll think you're getting an education. And frankly, Emma, if your friends are the kind of people who look down on others for going to community college, then maybe you need better friends. You don't understand. I can't show up to Madison's pool party this summer and tell everyone I'm going to community college. I'll be a complete social failure." The fact that she was more worried about her social status than her education told me everything I needed to know about her priorities. Emma still didn't understand that her actions had consequences, still believed that image was more important than substance. "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to humiliate the mother who is paying for your education," I said quietly. "That's not fair. You're ruining my entire life because of one stupid party." "I'm not ruining anything, Emma. I'm giving you the opportunity to build your own life instead of having everything handed to you. Some people would call that a gift." "A gift? You think making me homeless and destroying my future is a gift? You're not homeless, Emma. You're staying with friends because you haven't learned to manage your own housing yet. And your future isn't destroyed, it's just different than you expected. Harder, maybe, but potentially more meaningful because you'll have earned it yourself." I could hear her crying, but they sounded like tears of frustration rather than genuine sadness or remorse. She was still focused on what she'd lost, rather than what she might gain from learning to be self-sufficient. "I hate you," she whispered, and the words should have hurt more than they did. "I love you," I replied simply. "That's why I'm not rescuing you from this, because someone who loves you should want you to become strong and capable, not weak and dependent." I hung up before she could respond, my hands surprisingly steady. 6 months ago, hearing Emma say she hated me would have sent me into a spiral of guilt and self-doubt. Now, I understood that her anger was just another attempt to manipulate me into resuming my role as her problem solver. The next morning, I signed the papers to purchase Rosewood Manor. Harold and Dorothy were thrilled to be passing their beloved inn to someone who appreciated its potential, and I was terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. I was about to become a business owner, an entrepreneur, a woman who'd built something meaningful with her own vision and effort. Margaret helped me plan the transition, sharing practical advice about everything from supplier relationships to staff management to marketing strategies. I spent my days learning about occupancy rates and profit margins and customer service standards, subjects I'd never imagined myself studying, but that fascinated me completely. The first week of June, Harold and Dorothy officially moved out, and I moved in. My new home was the owner's suite on the third floor, a spacious apartment with a private entrance and stunning views of the gardens. It was smaller than the house I'd shared with Emma, but infinitely more peaceful. Every room reflected my own taste and choices rather than compromises made to accommodate someone else's preferences. I spent my first month as owner doing deep cleaning and minor renovations, preparing for the summer wedding season that would be my first real test as an innkeeper. I hired a small staff, Maria, an experienced housekeeper who'd worked for Harold and Dorothy for 5 years, James, a young chef fresh out of culinary school who was excited about developing a farm-to-table menu, and Sarah, a part-time assistant who could help with front desk duties and event coordination. Working with my staff was a revelation. For the first time in my adult life, I was managing people who respected my decisions and appreciated my leadership, rather than questioning every choice I made. Maria brought decades of hospitality experience and taught me countless details about maintaining the property's standards. James's enthusiasm for creative cooking inspired me to develop signature dishes that would set Rosewood Manor apart from other venues. Sarah's organizational skills helped me streamline booking procedures and guest communications. Together, we transformed Rosewood Manor from a tired business run by exhausted owners into a vibrant destination that attracted couples looking for a unique wedding venue and travelers seeking a peaceful retreat. Our first wedding reception was in early July, a celebration for a young couple who'd chosen us specifically because of our intimate size and personalized service. Watching the bride and groom dance on our terrace under string lights, while their families celebrated around tables set with flowers from our own gardens, I felt a sense of accomplishment I'd never experienced before. This was something I'd built, something I'd created through my own vision and effort. The success belonged entirely to me. That night, after the last guest had departed and my staff had finished cleaning up, I sat in the library with a glass of wine and allowed myself to feel proud. 6 months ago, I'd been a woman whose entire identity was wrapped up in being Emma's mother, whose every decision was filtered through what would be best for my daughter's future. Now I was a successful businesswoman, an entrepreneur who'd taken a risk and made it pay off. I thought about Emma often during those busy summer months, wondering how she was managing on her own and whether she was learning the lessons I'd hoped this separation would teach her. According to mutual friends who still kept in touch with both of us, she'd enrolled in community college for the fall semester and was working at a retail job to pay for her classes and living expenses. She was sharing an apartment with 2 roommates and apparently struggling with the reality of supporting herself on an entry-level salary. Part of me wanted to reach out, to check on her progress and offer encouragement for the steps she was taking toward independence. But I also knew that any contact from me would likely result in requests for financial help or emotional manipulation, designed to make me feel guilty for maintaining my boundaries. Emma needed to learn that she could handle difficult situations on her own, and my intervention would only undermine that lesson. The real test of my resolve came in late August when Madison Wheeler's mother called me. Patricia had somehow tracked down my number and left a voicemail that was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive concern. "Francine, dear, this is Patricia Wheeler. I'm calling because I'm worried about Emma. She looks so tired lately, and she's lost weight. She's working at that dreadful retail job and living in some tiny apartment with strangers. I know you two had some kind of falling out, but surely you can't want your daughter living like this? Maybe it's time to forgive whatever happened and help her get back on track. After all, she's just a child, and children make mistakes. I'm sure she's learned her lesson by now." The voicemail infuriated me on multiple levels. First, the assumption that I needed to forgive Emma rather than the other way around, as if I were the one who'd behaved badly at her birthday party. Second, the condescending suggestion that 18-year-old Emma was just a child who couldn't be expected to handle adult responsibilities. Third, the implication that working retail and living with roommates was somehow degrading rather than a normal part of many young people's transition to independence. But what bothered me most was Patricia's obvious belief that financial struggle was inherently harmful, that Emma's current lifestyle was automatically bad simply because it wasn't as comfortable as what she'd experienced while living off my sacrifices. Patricia couldn't conceive of the possibility that learning to support herself might actually be good for Emma's character development. I didn't return Patricia's call. Instead, I threw myself even more deeply into my work at Rosewood Manor, planning fall events and developing new services that would keep us busy through the slower winter months. I organized writing retreats for aspiring novelists, cooking classes featuring seasonal ingredients, and weekend getaways for couples looking to reconnect away from the distractions of daily life. Each new program I developed, each positive review we received, each returning guest who booked with us again reinforced my growing confidence in the path I'd chosen. I was building something meaningful and sustainable, something that brought joy to others while fulfilling my own need for purpose and accomplishment. But Emma's struggles, as reported through the local gossip network, continued to weigh on my mind. She'd apparently been evicted from her first apartment for missing rent payments and had to move back in with one of her friends temporarily. She'd been fired from her retail job for attendance issues and was working at a fast food restaurant for significantly less money. Her car had broken down, and she was taking public transportation to get around. Every setback was accompanied by messages from mutual acquaintances suggesting that I should step in to help, that I was being too harsh, that Emma had surely learned her lesson by now. But I also heard reports that Emma was still blaming me for her problems, still telling people that her mother had abandoned her for no good reason, still portraying herself as the victim of my inexplicable cruelty. The Emma I heard about in these reports wasn't a young woman who was learning humility and gratitude through adversity. She was someone who remained convinced that she deserved an easier life, and that her struggles were everyone else's fault but her own. The lessons I'd hoped she would learn didn't seem to be taking hold. As autumn arrived and Rosewood Manor's first year under my ownership drew to a close, I found myself facing a decision I hadn't anticipated. Emma would turn 19 in November, and for the first time in her life, I wouldn't be planning a birthday celebration for her. More importantly, I had to decide whether I was ready to open the door to reconciliation, or whether she needed more time to truly understand the consequences of taking people for granted. The woman I'd become over the past 8 months was stronger and more confident than the person who'd been humiliated at Emma's birthday party. I'd built a successful business, created a beautiful home, and discovered talents and interests I'd never had time to explore when my entire life revolved around my daughter's needs. I was no longer willing to sacrifice my newfound peace and self-respect for the sake of maintaining a relationship with someone who didn't appreciate what I brought to their life. But Emma was still my daughter, and somewhere underneath the entitled teenager she'd become was the little girl I'd raised with so much love and hope. The question was whether that little girl could still be reached, or if the damage to our relationship was too severe to repair. The answer would come sooner than I expected, and in a way that would test everything I'd learned about standing firm in my convictions while still leaving room for genuine redemption. The call came on a rainy Thursday evening in late October, just as I was finishing the final preparations for a weekend writing retreat. I'd been expecting it, in a way, though not quite like this. The voice on the other end was Emma's, but it was different from any conversation we'd had in the past year. Quieter, shakier, stripped of the entitlement and anger that had characterized all our previous interactions since I'd left. "Mom," she said, and I could hear tears in her voice before she even continued. "I need to tell you something." I set down the event planning binder I'd been reviewing and walked to the window of my office, looking out at the rain pelting the gardens I'd learned to tend with my own hands. "I'm listening. I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between us, heavy with implications I wasn't ready to process. My first instinct was to ask if she was okay, to offer comfort and support the way I'd always done when Emma faced difficulties. But I'd learned over the past year to pause before responding, to consider what she truly needed rather than what my maternal impulses demanded. "How far along are you?" I asked carefully. "About 3 months. I found out last week." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Mom, I don't know what to do. I can't afford a baby. I can barely afford to feed myself. And Derek, the father, he wants nothing to do with it. He says it's not his problem. Derek. I didn't recognize the name, which meant this was someone new since our estrangement began. I wondered briefly what kind of man would abandon a pregnant girlfriend, but then realized that Emma's recent pattern of poor judgment in relationships probably hadn't improved much in the past year. Have you seen a doctor? I asked. I went to the free clinic. They confirmed it and gave me some pamphlets about my options, but Mom, I'm scared. I don't know anything about being pregnant or having a baby or any of this. I thought maybe you could help me figure out what to do. There it was. The request for help that I'd been expecting and dreading in equal measure. After a year of struggling on her own, after months of refusing to acknowledge the hurt she'd caused me or take responsibility for her choices, Emma was once again asking me to solve her problems. The old me would have dropped everything and rushed to her side, would have taken over the decision-making process and handled all the complicated emotions and logistics. But the woman I'd become over the past year wasn't willing to resume that role without some serious changes in our relationship dynamics. This is a big decision, Emma, I said slowly. One that only you can make. What do you think you want to do? I don't know, she said, and started crying harder. I never thought about having a baby this young. I always figured I'd finish college first, get married, have a career, do everything in the right order. But nothing in my life has gone the way I planned since you left. The blame was subtle, but unmistakable. Since you left. As if my decision to stop enabling her dependency had somehow caused her to make poor choices about birth control and relationships. I felt the familiar frustration rise in my chest, but I pushed it down. This conversation was too important for old grievances. Emma, you're 19 years old. You're legally an adult, and you've been making your own decisions for over a year now. This pregnancy is the result of choices you made independently of me. I know that, she said quickly. I'm not blaming you for getting pregnant. I'm just saying that everything has been so hard since you left, and I don't have anyone to talk to about big stuff like this. What about your friends? Madison and Tyler and the others? There was a long pause. We don't really talk anymore. After I couldn't afford to do the things they wanted to do, after I had to move to that crappy apartment and work at McDonald's, they kind of stopped, including me. Turns out they were only interested in being friends when I could keep up with their lifestyle. I felt a pang of satisfaction that was immediately followed by guilt. I'd been right about Emma's so-called friends, but I took no pleasure in her learning that lesson the hard way. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you, though? Emma's voice had an edge to it now. Or are you glad that you were right about them? The question caught me off guard with its perceptiveness. For a moment, I heard echoes of the intelligent, thoughtful girl Emma had been before she'd gotten caught up in trying to impress people who didn't truly care about her. I'm sorry that you're hurting, I said honestly. I'm sorry that people you trusted turned out to be fair-weather friends. I'm not glad that you had to learn that lesson, even though I'm glad you finally see them for who they really are. Another long pause. Then, in a smaller voice, Mom, I think I made a huge mistake. About getting pregnant? About everything. About the way I treated you. About the friends I chose. About thinking that having money and looking good was more important than having people who actually care about me. Her voice broke completely then, and I could hear her sobbing on the other end of the line. This was the conversation I'd been waiting for. The acknowledgement of responsibility and regret that had been missing from all our previous interactions. But I also knew that Emma was scared and vulnerable right now, and that people often said things they didn't really mean when they were facing overwhelming challenges. What specifically do you think you did wrong? I asked gently. I was horrible to you at my birthday party. I was embarrassed by you, when I should have been proud of how hard you worked to make everything nice for me. I called you embarrassing when you've been the most dedicated, loving mother anyone could ask for. I cared more about impressing those stupid, shallow people than about treating you with respect. The words came tumbling out between sobs. And then when you left, instead of trying to understand why you were hurt, I just got angry that you weren't fixing my problems anymore. I closed my eyes, feeling tears start to form. This was what I'd hoped to hear for over a year, but it was hard to know whether Emma truly understood what she was saying, or if she was just telling me what she thought I wanted to hear because she needed help with her current crisis. Emma, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Okay. Are you apologizing because you genuinely understand what you did wrong and feel sorry for hurting me? Or are you apologizing because you're scared about being pregnant and you want me to come rescue you? The silence stretched so long that I wondered if she'd hung up. Finally she spoke, and her voice was steadier than it had been since the conversation started. I think it's both, she admitted. I am scared about being pregnant, and I do want your help. But Mom, I've been thinking about what I did to you every day, for months. Even before I found out about the baby, living on my own, struggling to pay bills, working jobs where people treat me like I'm disposable. It made me realize how hard you must have worked to take care of me all those years, and how much you must have sacrificed that I never even noticed. She paused, and I could hear her taking a shaky breath. When I was staying at Madison's house after I got evicted, her mom made this comment about how she could never imagine letting her daughter struggle the way you were letting me struggle. And I got so angry at first, because I thought she was right, that you were being cruel and heartless. But then I started thinking about why you left, really thinking about it instead of just feeling sorry for myself. And what did you realize? That I had spent years taking you for granted. That I had gotten so focused on what I didn't have, that I forgot to appreciate what I did have. That I had a mother who worked 2 jobs so I could have a college fund, who spent hours making me a birthday cake because she wanted it to be special, who sacrificed everything to give me opportunities. And instead of being grateful, I was embarrassed by you. The tears I'd been holding back started to fall. This wasn't the manipulative, self-serving apology I'd feared. This sounded like genuine understanding and remorse. I've been wanting to call you for months, Emma continued, but I was ashamed. I knew I owed you an apology, but I also knew that saying sorry wouldn't be enough after how badly I treated you. I kept thinking I needed to prove that I'd learned something, that I'd grown up, before I had the right to ask for your forgiveness. And now? Now I'm pregnant and scared, and I need my mom, she said simply. But not just to fix this for me. I need to learn how to be an adult, how to make hard decisions, how to take care of myself and maybe a baby too. I need you to teach me how to be strong like you are. Those words hit me harder than any apology could have. Emma wasn't just asking me to solve her problems, she was asking me to help her learn to solve them herself. She was recognizing that she lacked crucial life skills and wanted to develop them rather than continue depending on others to handle difficult situations for her. Emma, I need you to understand something. If we're going to rebuild our relationship, it has to be different from what it was before. I can't go back to being the person who handles everything for you while you take it for granted. I don't want that either, she said quickly. This year has been really hard, but it's also taught me things about myself that I needed to learn. I know I can work and pay bills and take care of basic stuff, even if I'm not very good at it yet. I don't want you to rescue me from this situation. I want you to help me figure out how to handle it myself. What does that look like to you? I don't know exactly. Maybe you could help me research my options about the pregnancy, like what resources are available for single mothers, what different choices would mean practically and financially. Maybe you could teach me how to make a budget that actually works, or how to find better housing, or how to apply for the kind of jobs that could actually support a family someday. I was quiet for a moment, processing what she was asking for. This was so different from the Emma who used to expect me to handle every complicated task for her. She was asking for guidance and education rather than immediate solutions. And what about the baby's father? I asked. You said he doesn't want to be involved. Derek is a loser, Emma said bluntly. I can see that now, but when I was lonely and struggling, he seemed like he cared about me. Turns out he was just looking for someone to sleep with, and when things got complicated, he disappeared. I don't want him in my life or the baby's life. If I decide to continue the pregnancy, I'll be doing it as a single mother. That's a huge responsibility, Emma. I know, but you raised me as a single mother. And you did an amazing job. I know I didn't appreciate it at the time, but you gave me a good life and taught me good values, even if I lost sight of them for a while. The conversation continued for another hour, covering practical concerns about healthcare and housing and employment, but also deeper questions about what Emma wanted her life to look like and what kind of mother she might want to be someday. She asked thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely interested in understanding the long-term implications of her choices rather than just looking for the easiest immediate solution. By the time we hung up, I'd agreed to drive down to see her the following weekend. Not to take over her decision-making process, but to help her research her options and think through the pros and cons of each choice. It felt like the beginning of a very different kind of relationship, one based on mutual respect rather than dependence and obligation. The drive to Emma's current address took me through parts of the city I'd never seen before, working-class neighborhoods where the houses were small and the yards were practical rather than decorative. I found her building, a converted Victorian house that had been divided into studio apartments, and climbed the narrow stairs to her unit on the third floor. When Emma opened the door, I barely recognized her. She'd lost weight, as Patricia Wheeler had mentioned, but more than that, she looked older. There was something in her face that hadn't been there before, a seriousness that made her seem more like an adult and less like the teenager I remembered. "Hi, Mom," she said quietly, and we stood there for a moment, both unsure how to navigate this reunion. "Hi, sweetheart," I replied, and she stepped forward to hug me. The embrace lasted longer than our hugs usually did, and I could feel her holding on tightly, like she was afraid I might disappear again. When we separated, her eyes were bright with tears. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Thank you for calling me." Her apartment was tiny but clean and organized. She'd clearly been working hard to make the space livable, despite its limitations. There was a small table with 2 chairs, a fold-out couch that served as her bed, and a kitchenette with barely enough room for one person to cook. But she'd hung curtains on the windows and put plants on the fire escape, small touches that made the place feel like home rather than just temporary shelter. "It's not much," Emma said, following my gaze around the room, "but it's mine. I pay for it myself, and nobody can kick me out as long as I make the rent." "It's lovely," I said, and meant it. The apartment had something our old house had never quite achieved. It felt like it belonged entirely to the person living in it, decorated according to her own taste and budget, rather than compromised to accommodate someone else's needs. We spent the afternoon researching Emma's options and talking through her concerns about each possibility. She'd clearly done a lot of thinking on her own before calling me, and had specific questions about practical matters like health insurance and maternity leave policies and childcare costs. What impressed me most was her approach to the decision-making process. Instead of looking for someone else to tell her what to do, she was gathering information to make her own informed choice. She asked my opinion but didn't seem to be waiting for me to solve the problem for her. "I keep going back and forth," she admitted as we sat at her small table with pamphlets and printouts spread between us. "Part of me thinks I should wait until I'm older and more established before having a baby. But part of me thinks that if I'm going to be a single mother anyway, maybe it doesn't matter if I do it now or in 5 years. I'll still be figuring it out as I go." "What does your gut tell you?" I asked. She was quiet for a long moment. "That I want to keep the baby," she said finally. "I know it will be hard. Probably harder than anything I've ever done. But I feel like this could be my chance to build the kind of family I wish we could have been. Where love and respect go both ways, where we appreciate each other instead of taking each other for granted." Her words took my breath away. Emma was talking about using this challenge as an opportunity for growth, rather than seeing it as a disaster that someone needed to fix for her. She was taking responsibility not just for her current situation, but for creating something better in the future. "If you decide to continue the pregnancy, I want you to know that I'll support you," I told her. "Not by taking over or solving everything for you, but by being here when you need advice or help or just someone to talk to. Even after how awful I was to you, Emma, people make mistakes. Sometimes terrible, hurtful mistakes. What matters is whether they learn from those mistakes and commit to doing better. You've shown me over the past year that you're capable of learning and growing, even when it's difficult." She started crying then, but they seemed like tears of relief rather than sadness. "I was so afraid you wouldn't forgive me. I was afraid I'd destroyed our relationship permanently." "You hurt me deeply," I said honestly. "And it took me a long time to get past that hurt. But you're my daughter, and I love you. I want us to have a relationship, but it has to be a healthier one than what we had before. What does that look like? It looks like what we're doing right now. Having honest conversations about difficult topics. Treating each other with respect even when we disagree. You taking responsibility for your own life while still being able to ask for support when you need it. We talked until late that evening, covering everything from baby names to career plans to how we wanted our relationship to work going forward. Emma shared stories about her struggles over the past year, the mistakes she'd made, and the lessons she'd learned. She talked about the loneliness of losing her shallow friendships, but also the satisfaction of supporting herself through her own work. I told her about Rosewood Manor, about the joy I'd discovered in building something that was entirely my own creation. She was fascinated by the details of running a hospitality business and asked thoughtful questions about the challenges and rewards of entrepreneurship. "I'm proud of you, Mom," she said as I was getting ready to leave the next morning. "I know I never said that before, but I should have. You built something amazing after I hurt you so badly. Instead of just being bitter or giving up, you created this whole new life for yourself." "I had a good teacher," I replied. "This year taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their bad choices, even when it's painful for both of you." 3 months later, I was back in Emma's apartment, but this time I was helping her pack for a move. She decided to relocate closer to Rosewood Manor, not to live with me, but to be near enough that we could see each other regularly as she navigated new motherhood. She'd found a job at a local nonprofit that provided services for pregnant women and new mothers. Work that would give her valuable experience, while also helping other women in similar situations. Her pregnancy was progressing well, and she was handling the physical and emotional challenges with a maturity that amazed me. She'd taken childbirth classes, researched pediatricians, and prepared for labor and delivery with the same thoroughness she'd once applied to planning the perfect party outfit. But this time, her focus was on substance rather than appearance, on building skills rather than projecting an image. "I want to ask you something," Emma said as we folded her maternity clothes into boxes. "But I'm afraid you'll think I'm trying to take advantage of your generosity." "What is it?" "Would you consider being my birth coach? I know it's a lot to ask, especially given our history, but I can't think of anyone else I'd rather have with me during labor." The request surprised me with its simplicity and intimacy. Emma wasn't asking me to solve her problems or take over her responsibilities. She was asking me to share in one of the most important moments of her life, to be present for the transition from pregnancy to motherhood. "I would be honored," I said, and meant it completely. "Even if I do everything wrong? Even if I panic or make bad decisions or can't handle the pain? Emma, you've already proven that you can handle much more than you thought you could. You've supported yourself, made hard choices, and taken responsibility for your life in ways that would have seemed impossible to you 2 years ago. I have complete faith that you'll be able to handle motherhood too." She smiled through tears. "I hope the baby gets your strength and determination instead of my tendency to make everything more dramatic than it needs to be." "I hope the baby gets the best of both of us," I replied. "Your creativity and passion, my persistence and work ethic. But most of all, I hope we can both be the kind of women she can be proud to have in her life." 2 weeks later, I was holding my granddaughter for the first time, marveling at her tiny fingers, and the way she seemed to study my face with serious dark eyes. Emma had handled labor with remarkable grace, breathing through contractions and staying focused on the goal rather than getting overwhelmed by the process. "She's perfect," I whispered, rocking the baby while Emma rested. "I want to name her Frances," Emma said quietly. "After you, if that's okay." I looked up, surprised. "Are you sure? It's an old-fashioned name." "I like old-fashioned things now," Emma said with a smile. "Besides, I want her to be named after the strongest woman I know. The woman who taught me that love sometimes means setting boundaries, and that the best gifts are the ones that help people become who they're meant to be." As I held little Frances and watched Emma begin her journey as a mother, I reflected on how much had changed since that devastating birthday party 2 years earlier. Emma had lost her college fund, her entitled friends, and her comfortable dependence on me solving all her problems. In return, she'd gained self-reliance, genuine strength, and a clearer understanding of what really mattered in life. Our relationship had been broken and rebuilt on a foundation of mutual respect, rather than one-sided sacrifice. Emma had learned to appreciate what others did for her instead of taking it for granted, and I had learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to make someone else's life easier at the expense of their character development. The college fund that had once represented Emma's future had instead become the foundation for my own transformation, and ultimately for a different kind of legacy altogether. Rosewood Manor was thriving, providing me with both financial independence and personal fulfillment. More importantly, the lessons Emma had learned through struggle and hardship had prepared her to be a thoughtful, grateful mother who would hopefully raise Francis with an appreciation for hard work and the value of treating others with respect. As I watched Emma tenderly feeding her daughter, I realized that we'd both received educations over the past 2 years, just not the kind either of us had expected. Emma had learned about resilience, responsibility, and the importance of genuine relationships over superficial ones. I had learned about my own strength, about the difference between supporting someone and enabling them, and about the possibility of creating a meaningful life at any stage. The money I'd spent on Emma's college had instead paid for life lessons that no university could have provided. We'd both graduated with honors from the School of Hard Experience, and we were finally ready to build the kind of family relationship we should have had all along. The first year of little Francis's life brought changes I never could have anticipated. Emma had settled into motherhood with a determination that both impressed and worried me. She was so focused on being the perfect parent, on making up for her own teenage mistakes by being everything to her daughter, that I sometimes saw echoes of my own younger self in her fierce dedication. "You don't have to be perfect, you know," I told her one afternoon as we sat in Rosewood Manor's garden while Frances napped in her stroller. Emma had been up most of the night with a colicky baby and was exhausted but still refusing to accept help with anything beyond basic childcare advice. "I know that," Emma said, but her tone suggested otherwise. "I just want to make sure I don't mess up the way I did with you. I want Frances to grow up appreciating what she has, instead of taking it for granted." "Emma, you were a teenager. Teenagers are supposed to make mistakes and test boundaries. That's how they learn to become adults. Frances will probably do the same thing when she's 17, no matter how perfectly you parent her." Emma's face crumpled slightly. "What if she treats me the way I treated you? What if she's embarrassed by me and says horrible things that break my heart?" I reached over and squeezed her hand. "Then you'll handle it the way I handled it. You'll set boundaries, you'll refuse to enable bad behavior, and you'll love her enough to let her learn difficult lessons. And hopefully, if you've raised her with good values, she'll figure out her mistakes faster than you did." "How can you be so calm about the possibility of your granddaughter hurting me the way I hurt you?" "Because pain is part of parenting, sweetheart. The goal isn't to avoid ever being hurt by your children. The goal is to raise them to be decent human beings who can learn from their mistakes and take responsibility for their actions. Sometimes that requires experiencing consequences that feel harsh in the moment but lead to growth in the long run." Emma was quiet for a while, watching Frances sleep peacefully in the dappled sunlight filtering through the oak trees. "I still can't believe you forgave me," she said finally. "Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night remembering the things I said to you, and I feel sick all over again." "Good," I said simply, and Emma looked at me with surprise. "Good?" "Good that you still feel remorse. It means you've genuinely learned from what happened instead of just intellectually understanding that you were wrong. The day you stop feeling bad about hurting people you love is the day you've lost something important about yourself. But doesn't it ever get easier? Doesn't the guilt ever go away? It gets different, less sharp, less overwhelming. But it stays with you as a reminder of who you don't want to be again. I think that's actually a gift, even though it doesn't feel like one." Frances stirred in her stroller, making the soft murmuring sounds that meant she'd be waking up soon. Emma immediately leaned forward, ready to tend to her daughter's needs, but I gestured for her to stay seated. "Let me," I said, lifting Frances from the stroller and settling her in my arms. She blinked up at me with those serious, dark eyes that reminded me so much of Emma as a baby, then made a contented sound and snuggled against my chest. "She loves you so much already," Emma said, watching us with a soft smile. "Sometimes I think she's more settled with you than she is with me." That's because I'm not anxious about every little thing. Babies pick up on our emotional state. The more worried you are about being perfect, the more she'll sense that tension. How do I stop worrying? How do I relax when I'm so afraid of making the wrong choices? Experience. Time. Making some mistakes and realizing that most of them aren't as catastrophic as you feared. Frances is a healthy, loved baby. You're doing fine. It was true. Despite her anxiety about parenting perfectly, Emma was actually a very good mother. She was attentive without being smothering, devoted without being obsessive. She read to Frances every day, sang to her while she cooked dinner, and had already started a savings account for her daughter's future, contributing small amounts from each paycheck with the same determination I'd once shown. But watching Emma navigate new motherhood also brought back memories of my own early days as a single parent, and I found myself thinking more and more about the choices I'd made during Emma's childhood. Had I been too focused on providing financially at the expense of teaching life skills? Had I enabled her dependence by always stepping in to solve problems, rather than letting her struggle through them herself? The question became more pressing as I watched Emma deliberately make different choices with Frances. When the baby fussed during errands, Emma didn't immediately give her everything she wanted to stop the crying. When Frances started showing preferences for certain foods, Emma didn't automatically cater to them if they weren't nutritionally sound. She was already thinking about how to raise a child who would be grateful rather than entitled, strong rather than dependent. "I've been thinking about something," Emma said one evening as we cleaned up after dinner at my place. Frances was playing on a blanket nearby, fascinated by a set of wooden blocks that made different sounds when she banged them together. "What's that?" "I want to pay you back for the college fund." I looked up from the dishes I was washing, surprised. "Emma, that's not necessary." "Yes, it is. Not because I think you were wrong to take it, but because I want to earn back what I lost through my own actions. I want to be able to tell Frances someday that when I made a terrible mistake, I didn't just apologize and move on, I made it right." "Sweetheart, that would take you years." The fund was over $60,000. "I know, I've done the math. If I put away $200 a month, it'll take me 25 years to pay it back completely. But I think that's appropriate, actually. It took you 18 years to save that money while you were raising me. It should take me at least that long to repay it while I'm raising Frances." I dried my hands and turned to face her fully. "Why is this important to you?" "Because I want Frances to grow up seeing that actions have consequences, but also that people can choose to make amends for their mistakes. I want her to know that her mother didn't just say sorry for hurting her grandmother, and then continue benefiting from that hurt. I want her to know that I took responsibility for fixing what I broke." The conviction in Emma's voice moved me more than I expected. This wasn't about guilt or obligation, it was about integrity and setting an example for her daughter. "If it's important to you, then I accept," I said. "But I have one condition." "What's that?" "The money goes into a college fund for Frances. Not back to me personally, but toward her future education. That way, we're both investing in the next generation instead of trying to undo the past." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "That's perfect. Mom, that's absolutely perfect." We worked out the details over the following weeks. Emma would transfer $200 monthly into an account we'd set up together for Frances's education. It wasn't a huge amount, but invested over 18 years with compound interest, it would grow into a substantial foundation for Frances's future. More importantly, it gave Emma a concrete way to demonstrate the values she wanted to instill in her daughter. Frances would grow up seeing her mother work extra shifts and budget carefully to meet this commitment, seeing that taking responsibility for your mistakes required more than words. The arrangement also marked a new phase in our relationship. Instead of Emma being the recipient of my financial sacrifices, we were now partners in building Frances's future. Emma was contributing according to her means, while I helped with childcare and guidance, but the responsibility was shared rather than one-sided. As Frances grew from infant to toddler, I watched Emma navigate the daily challenges of single parenthood with grace and determination. She worked full-time at the nonprofit while pursuing an online degree in social work, studying late at night after Frances was asleep and during nap time on weekends. She was building a career that would provide better financial security, while also doing work that felt meaningful to her. "I love what I do," she told me one afternoon as we watched Frances toddle around the inn's garden, chasing butterflies and squealing with delight. Helping other women who are in situations like mine, showing them that being a single mother doesn't mean your life is over, that you can still build something good for yourself and your children. "You're proof of that yourself," I said. "Look at what you've accomplished in just 2 years." Emma had indeed accomplished remarkable things. She'd completed her degree with honors while working and raising a toddler. She'd been promoted twice at her job and was now supervising other caseworkers. She'd bought a reliable used car and moved into a larger apartment with a separate bedroom for Frances. Most importantly, she developed into a confident, capable woman who handled challenges with determination rather than panic. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if you hadn't left that night," Emma mused, settling onto the bench beside me while Frances investigated a flower bed under my watchful eye. "What do you think would have happened?" "I think I would have kept taking you for granted. I would have gone to college on your money, probably continued being entitled and shallow, maybe married someone like Derek, who didn't really care about me but looked good on paper. I think I would have become one of those people who never really grew up because they never had to. And now? Now I know what I'm capable of. I know I can handle hard things, that I can support myself and my daughter, that I can build a life I'm proud of through my own effort. I wouldn't trade that knowledge for anything, even if it came through suffering." Frances toddled over to us then, her chubby hands full of dandelions she'd picked from the grass. She presented them to me with a proud smile, chattering in the mixed language of actual words and baby sounds that only she fully understood. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, accepting the wilted flowers like they were precious roses. "They're beautiful," Frances beamed and then turned to Emma, offering her a handful of petals she'd pulled off another flower. "Mama, pretty!" "Very pretty," Emma agreed, kissing Frances's forehead. "Just like you." Watching this interaction, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with being right about Emma's friends, or justified in my decision to leave. It was the satisfaction of seeing someone you love become their best self, of watching a relationship heal and grow stronger than it had ever been before. Emma had learned to appreciate what she had, instead of focusing on what she lacked. Frances was growing up in an atmosphere of gratitude and hard work, rather than entitlement and instant gratification. And I had discovered that it was possible to love someone enough to let them struggle, to refuse to make their life easier, when easy wasn't what they needed. The inn continued to thrive during this time, benefiting from word-of-mouth recommendations and repeat customers who appreciated the personal attention and peaceful atmosphere we provided. I'd hired additional staff as our bookings increased, and we'd added new services like yoga retreats and artisan workshops that attracted guests looking for experiences rather than just accommodation. But perhaps more satisfying than the business success was the sense of community that had developed around Rosewood Manor. Many of our guests returned annually, and we'd become a gathering place for local events and celebrations. I'd found my place in this small town, building relationships with neighbors and local business owners that felt genuine and reciprocal. "You seem really happy here," Emma observed during one of her weekend visits. We were preparing dinner together in the inn's kitchen while Frances napped upstairs, and I was teaching Emma how to make the herb-crusted salmon that had become one of our signature dishes. "I am happy," I said, realizing as I said it how completely true it was. For the first time in my adult life, I'm living entirely for myself, while still being able to help the people I care about. It's a balance I never thought I'd find. Do you ever miss our old life, the house, the routine, even the stress of managing everything for me? I considered the question as I seasoned the fish. I miss some things. I miss the version of you that existed before you became a teenager. Emma laughed at that. But I don't miss feeling like my worth was tied up in how well I could solve your problems, or how much I could sacrifice for your benefit. I don't miss feeling like I had to earn love through service. Is that how it felt? Like you had to earn my love? Sometimes, especially toward the end, when you seemed so critical of everything I did and so focused on what I couldn't provide rather than what I could. I started feeling like I was failing as a mother because I couldn't give you the lifestyle your friends had. Emma was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. I never realized that's how I was making you feel. I thought you were just naturally self-sacrificing, that you preferred to put my needs first. I did prefer it in a way. It gave me purpose and made me feel needed. But it also prevented me from developing my own identity and interests. When you didn't need me anymore, or at least when you made it clear that what I provided wasn't good enough, I had no idea who I was supposed to be. And now you know? Now I know I'm someone who can build something beautiful and meaningful with her own vision and effort. I'm someone who can set boundaries and stick to them even when it's difficult. I'm someone who can be proud of what she's accomplished without needing anyone else's validation. Emma smiled. I'm proud of you too, you know. For having the courage to leave, for building this amazing place, for teaching me lessons I didn't want to learn but desperately needed to learn. And I'm proud of you for learning them, for growing into someone I genuinely enjoy spending time with rather than just loving because you're my daughter. Do you think Frances will have to go through the same kind of painful growing up that I did? Probably some version of it. Growing up requires making mistakes and learning from them, but hopefully she'll make different mistakes than you made, and hopefully they won't be as hurtful to the people who love her. What if I'm too strict with her because I'm afraid of raising another entitled teenager? What if I overcorrect and make her childhood too hard? Then you'll adjust. Parenting isn't about getting everything right the first time. It's about paying attention and making changes when something isn't working. The fact that you're already thinking about these things means you're less likely to make serious mistakes. Frances woke up from her nap as we were finishing dinner preparations, and Emma went upstairs to get her while I set the table. When they came back down, Frances was rubbing her eyes sleepily but perked up when she saw the activity in the kitchen. "Help!" she announced, reaching toward the counter where I was arranging vegetables on a platter. "You want to help Grandma cook?" Emma asked, and Frances nodded enthusiastically. I lifted Frances onto a chair beside me and gave her a wooden spoon to hold while I finished the preparations. She took her job very seriously, stirring the air above the vegetables and narrating her actions in her distinctive toddler language. "She's going to be a chef someday," Emma predicted, laughing as Frances conducted an elaborate conversation with a cherry tomato. "Or a teacher, or a doctor, or whatever she wants to be," I said. "The important thing is that she'll grow up knowing she's capable of achieving her goals through her own effort. And knowing that her family believes in her but won't do the work for her." Exactly. As we sat down to eat, Frances in her high chair between Emma and me, I reflected on how different this family dinner felt from the tense, complicated meals we'd shared when Emma was a teenager. There was no underlying resentment, no unspoken demands or expectations. Just 3 generations of women enjoying each other's company and sharing a meal I'd prepared with love, rather than obligation. Frances threw a piece of salmon on the floor and looked at us expectantly, waiting to see if this would result in attention or entertainment. When neither Emma nor I made a big fuss about it, she simply went back to eating the rest of her food. "Good job not reacting," I told Emma quietly. She was testing to see if throwing food would get a response. "It's so hard not to jump up and clean it immediately," Emma admitted. "But I'm learning that not every little thing she does requires immediate intervention." "That's a lesson that applies to more than just toddler behavior," I said with a meaningful look. Emma smiled. "I know. Trust me, I've learned that lesson thoroughly." After dinner, we took Frances for a walk around the inn's property, showing her the gardens and the small pond where ducks sometimes came to visit. She was fascinated by everything, stopping to examine flowers and rocks and bugs with the intense concentration only small children can bring to such discoveries. "I want her to grow up appreciating nature," Emma said as we watched Frances carefully study a butterfly that had landed on a nearby bush. "I want her to find joy in simple things instead of always needing expensive entertainment or material possessions to be happy." She's off to a good start. Look how fascinated she is by a butterfly and a pond. She doesn't need elaborate toys or activities to be completely engaged with the world. I hope I can preserve that as she gets older. I hope I don't get caught up in trying to give her everything other kids have just because I don't want her to feel left out. You'll find the right balance, and if you don't, I'll be here to help you figure it out. Promise? Promise. But Emma, I also want you to know that you don't need me to be a good mother to Francis. You've already proven that you can handle the big challenges on your own. My role now is support and guidance, not management and problem solving. I know. And I like it better this way. I like feeling like we're partners in raising her, instead of you being responsible for everything, while I just show up for the fun parts. As the sun began to set, we headed back toward the inn, Francis getting sleepy in Emma's arms. She'd had a full day of exploration and excitement, and was ready for her bedtime routine of bath, story, and lullabies. Will you sing to her tonight? Emma asked as we climbed the stairs to the guest room where she and Francis stayed during their visits. Of course! What would you like me to sing? That song you used to sing to me when I was little. The one about the mockingbird. I smiled, remembering countless nights of singing Emma to sleep with "Hush, Little Baby," promising to buy her various things if the mockingbird wouldn't sing. It seemed fitting to pass that tradition on to Francis, though I suspected her childhood would be filled with different kinds of promises and reassurances than Emma's had been. As I sang softly to Francis, watching her eyelids grow heavy while Emma brushed her teeth in the adjoining bathroom, I felt a deep sense of completion. This was what family was supposed to feel like. Loving but not suffocating, supportive but not enabling, connected but not dependent. Francis fell asleep halfway through the second verse, her small hand curled around my finger. I sat with her for a few more minutes, treasuring the peaceful moment and thinking about how much had changed since that terrible birthday party 3 years ago. Emma emerged from the bathroom and smiled when she saw us. She looks so content with you. She's a good baby. You should be proud of how well you're raising her. I am proud, but I'm also terrified most of the time. Being responsible for another person's entire well-being is overwhelming. It gets easier and more complicated at the same time. But Francis is lucky to have a mother who cares as much as you do. I carefully transferred Francis to her travel crib and kissed her forehead before heading toward the door. Emma followed me out into the hallway, closing the door quietly behind us. Mom, can I ask you something? Always. Do you think you'll ever want to get married again? Have a relationship with someone who isn't related to you? The question surprised me. I haven't really thought about it. Why do you ask? Because you seem so complete now, so happy with your life, but I also wonder if you're missing out on companionship, on having someone to share all this with. I considered this as we walked downstairs to the kitchen to clean up from dinner. I suppose I'm open to the possibility, but I'm not actively looking for anyone. I like my independence too much to compromise it for just anyone. What would it take? What kind of person would be worth giving up some of that independence for? Someone who enhanced my life rather than complicating it. Someone who had their own interests and goals rather than expecting me to revolve around them. Someone who appreciated what I'd built here rather than wanting to change it. Someone who understood that you're not looking to be rescued or taken care of. Exactly. I've learned that I can take care of myself quite well. Any relationship I entered now would have to be because I wanted that person in my life, not because I needed them. Emma smiled. I hope you find that someday. You deserve to have someone who appreciates how amazing you are. Thank you, sweetheart, but I'm already surrounded by people who appreciate me. My guests, my staff, my neighbors, and most importantly, you and Francis. I'm not lacking for love in my life, but it's different having a partner. Someone to share the daily details with, someone to make plans with. It is different, and maybe someday I'll want that again. But for now, I'm enjoying this phase of my life too much to worry about what might be missing. We finished cleaning the kitchen and sat down in the library with cups of tea, enjoying the quiet evening and the satisfaction of a day well spent. Through the windows, we could see the gardens lit by moonlight, peaceful and beautiful in the soft darkness. I love it here, Emma said, curling up in one of the reading chairs. Sometimes I think about moving closer permanently, maybe finding a job in town so Francis could grow up near you. You're always welcome to move closer. But make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. Don't move here just because it feels safe and familiar. Move here if it's where you want to build your life. What do you mean? I mean that you've worked hard to become independent and capable. Don't give that up by moving somewhere you'll be tempted to lean on me too much. Make sure you're choosing this area because it offers opportunities for you and Francis, not just because it's where your mother lives. Emma was quiet for a moment. You're right. I need to think about what's best for Francis's future, not just what feels comfortable for me right now. That said, if you did decide to move here, I think it could work well for all of us. You've proven that you can maintain healthy boundaries, and I've learned not to automatically step in and solve problems that aren't mine to solve. It would be nice for Frances to grow up knowing her grandmother well, to have that stability and connection. And it would be nice for me to watch her grow up, to be part of her daily life instead of just weekend visits. We talked until late that night about possibilities and plans, about dreams for Frances's future and hopes for our continued relationship. By the time we went to bed, we decided that Emma would start looking into job opportunities in the area, not with any pressure to move immediately, but as a way of exploring whether relocating made practical sense. The next morning, as Emma packed up their things for the drive home, Frances clung to my legs and cried when she realized they were leaving. It broke my heart a little, but it also filled me with joy to know that she associated my home with love and safety. "We'll be back soon, sweetheart," I promised her, picking her up for one last hug. "Grandma will see you again very soon." "Stay," Frances demanded, wrapping her arms around my neck. "I wish I could keep you here forever," I told her. "But you and Mama have to go home to your own house now. That's where your toys are, and your crib, and all your books." Frances considered this logic and seemed to accept it, though she still whimpered a little when Emma buckled her into her car seat. "Thank you for this weekend," Emma said, hugging me. "Goodbye. For everything, but especially for showing me what it looks like to build a life you're proud of. Thank you for letting me be part of Frances's life, and for working so hard to rebuild our relationship. I'm proud of the woman you've become." As I watched their car disappear down the driveway, I felt the familiar mixture of sadness and contentment that came with their departures. I missed them when they were gone, but I also appreciated the peace and independence of my daily routine. Margaret appeared beside me as I stood waving, even though the car was long out of sight. "They're good for you," she observed. "They are. Different than they used to be, but better in almost every way." It's remarkable how much Emma has changed. She's become quite a lovely young woman. She had to go through some difficult times to get there, but yes, she has. And Frances is going to benefit from having a mother who learned those lessons early. Do you think they'll move here permanently? Maybe. Emma is going to explore the possibilities. But honestly, I'm happy either way. If they move here, wonderful. If they stay where they are, we'll continue to have these weekend visits and holidays together. The important thing is that our relationship is strong enough now to withstand either choice. Margaret nodded approvingly. That's the sign of a truly healthy family dynamic, when geography doesn't threaten the emotional bonds. As we walked back toward the inn, I thought about how much my definition of success had changed over the past few years. Once, I would have measured my worth as a mother by how much I could provide for Emma, how many of her problems I could solve, how comfortable I could make her life. Now, I measured it by how well I'd prepared her to handle life's challenges on her own, how effectively I'd taught her to be grateful for what she had, and how successfully I'd modeled the importance of building something meaningful through your own effort. By those measures, both Emma and I had graduated with honors from the School of Hard Experience. We'd learned lessons about love and respect and responsibility that couldn't have been taught any easier way. And most importantly, we'd emerged from that difficult period with a relationship that was stronger and more genuine than what we'd had before. The college fund that had once represented the extent of my love for Emma had been transformed into something much more valuable. The foundation for a family legacy built on mutual respect, shared values, and the understanding that the most precious gifts are often the ones that require us to become our best selves in order to receive them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.